Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would cover some stuff that I saw Greg Nuckols and OmarIsuf put out. And it was essentially saying that, hey, powerlifters need to train more like bodybuilders. And I'm going to laugh at that because I know what they're trying to say, but I think they're flat wrong. So let me go ahead and put on my +5 hat of speechcraft and let's talk about this. And the reason they're wrong is because the thing that they're calling training like a bodybuilder is the way that powerlifters, elite powerlifters, already train. So when you're telling them to train like a bodybuilder, what you actually mean is keep training like elite powerlifters, right? Keep training like the world record holders do. Instead of saying train like a bodybuilder, because the point here is that bodybuilders should probably train more like powerlifters do, particularly drug-free bodybuilders, but powerlifters should probably be eating like bodybuilders. Right? If you really wanted to bridge the gap correctly between all this, the better way to term it might be train like a power lifter, eat like a bodybuilder, right? So that you get leaner. And that probably worked pretty good for everybody, wouldn't it? But the point we come over to is that people say, well, what do you mean? Isn't powerlifting just about hitting a max squat, bench press, and deadlift? Yeah, man, that's exactly how all the world record holders in powerlifting train. That's what they do, man. They come to the gym and they max on squat, bench, and deadlift and go home. No, the truth is that's not how most elite powerlifters train. And I think what we have to understand a lot of times in the past, when I've talked about training minimalism, we're coming from the same concept that like the starting strength model works off of, that Mark Rippetoe and all those people work off of. And that's building a strength base. It's general strength. That's not strength specialization. And those guys will be the first ones to tell you. When I tell most of you guys out there, I'm like, look, you can do minimalist style training and get a good strength base. You can get a good size base doing that. But it's not necessarily going to get you to the elite level. I'm not saying you need to be training like an elite powerlifter to build that base. Most of you guys out there could get really strong at 5 or 6 exercises with a couple little small accessory movements and get reasonably jacked while getting really, really strong, right? You could do that. But what you really find with most real elite powerlifters is that they do a lot of accessory work, right? Most powerlifters understand the importance of body composition and muscle mass. And when you start competing at real powerlifting meets, you're going to find most serious powerlifters are stacked and jacked, right? That's the norm. That's the norm. They're thick and big, and it's not just fat. They're only usually really fat in the heavier weight classes. You go down to the 198, 220, sometimes now we're getting up to 242, you're finding guys who are 6 foot tall or less who are peeled. At least by normal people's standards. What the average person walking down the street would call ripped, not what a bodybuilder would call ripped. But you see that already. And I think the difference here is that we're not saying to train like a bodybuilder, meaning work on your bicep peaks all day and do concentration curls. But I think what they're trying to say is that bodybuilders need to appreciate things like training volume to hypertrophy lagging muscles to get stronger. But that's not a new concept. That is already systems that have been in place that, again, tons of coaches in the strength world have promoted for decades now. That's not anything new. And people say, well, what do you mean? Well, powerlifters have always known that beyond the novice level and beyond the early intermediate level, you can't just do the basic exercises, right? You can't just do the basic exercises and just get strong at those indefinitely, because eventually we start reaching a threshold where the specificity doesn't help you so much anymore. People say, well, what do you mean? All right, someone in your first year or two in the gym, or if you take a long break from bench pressing or a long break from squatting, you can come back and do lots and lots of squatting or bench pressing and rebuild it up. The practice has direct specificity, but at a certain threshold, we start running into issues of the amount of volume that you need to continue to adapt starts to exceed the workloads that you're capable of generating on those lifts. Furthermore, outside of a small amount of training specificity, you don't get much extra benefit from just practicing a non-technical movement that much. In other words, a squat, a bench press, and a deadlift are technical, but not as technical as, say, Olympic lifting, right? Weightlifting. You don't have to practice 15 sets of those every single week to perfect them. Eventually, you get to a point to where once you have your form decent on those, a few sets every week, if that is necessary to maintain it. And from that point, you've got to be working on all your other performance elements, weak links, everything else. And that's the point where training volume starts to matter. And I mean, truth be told, it's possible for a powerlifter, and there are powerlifters who do this, and this is going to sound like blasphemy coming from me, to get away with literally doing sets of 8 to 10 on machines for a third of their workout if they wanted to. I'm not saying that they necessarily should. I'm saying there's some muscles that might be beneficial if they don't have access to the other equipment. In other words, if you don't have access to a glute ham raise or a reverse hyper, you know, some machines or cables might come in handy. Because here's what most powerlifters know at this point. If you can't do endless sets of bench press because of overuse injuries, training, fatigue, everything else, or endless sets of deadlifts, and you realize that your triceps or your hamstrings are a potential weak link in your lift because a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle, you look at them and say, man, my hamstrings need to be bigger. My triceps need to be bigger. Well, what are you going to do about it? If you're already doing 10 sets of bench press twice a week on your workouts, or bench variations of pressing, between your other assistance movements, and your triceps aren't getting enough work, what are you going to do? Try to bench press more? Try to do heavy close grip? Maybe. How much training volume can you handle on those big lifts? At what point do they become an issue where your chest is getting too much work? Right, you're going to have to do some smaller tricep-specific exercises, and hopefully ones that thicken up the parts of the tricep the most that carry over to the bench press. Because we don't use all 3 heads of the tricep evenly on the bench, right? They're not all evenly recruited. You could focus on certain areas more than another, and it will improve your bench more. Now, will a generally bigger tricep improve your bench press? Yes. Will things like focusing more on the medial head help it even more? Yeah, because that one is really important for the bench. Right? And it could be the weak link, and it could be the difference between thickening that up could end up adding 20 or 30 pounds to your max bench, right? Without your chest getting bigger. But then if your bench work all starts going up, then your chest will start growing again. Same thing, your deadlift at a certain threshold, what happens if your hamstrings are weak at the bottom? What if you're struggling to break it off the floor and get enough speed because your hamstrings just can't contract hard enough and generate enough force? Or you've been pulling hamstrings. You're going to have to put meat on your hamstrings. What are you going to do? More deadlifting? Well, what happens if you're already doing a lot of axial loading exercises? You're doing heavy squats, heavy deadlifts. Right, there comes a point to where you say, well, is that necessarily the best way to bring up my hamstrings further? No, you're going to throw some hamstring volume in. It might be a glute ham raise, preferably. That would be real high on my priority list because it works the hamstring in a way differently from a hip hinge. It will help prevent tears. It will help prevent hamstring tears and give you better knee joint stability. Again, real big for track and field athletes, right? Field athletes, glute ham raises, or you might do some other smaller exercises. And are you going to do singles on them? I mean, are we going to do a bunch of 1-rep maxes on that? Of course not. Are we going to do speed work with singles? No. You're going to do reps. You're going to do 5s, 8s, 10s. And what you need to do, again, as a strength athlete, all those weak links, what happens? You need to work them with as much volume as they can recover from every week. That's usually going to be more moderate and in some cases higher reps. Now, is that bodybuilding per se? No, I don't think it is. Some people say, well, that's bodybuilding. No, not really. That's just general hypertrophy training, right? You're thickening up the muscles that are holding back your lifts the most, either from an injury prevention perspective or a straight up force generation perspective. Well, if powerlifters do that, and most elite powerlifters do, it's how you guys see me training these days. People are noticing I am getting thicker. I am getting leaner on my training clips. It's coming along. It's slow. It's happening real slow, but it's happening. You have that effect happen. You're going to get thicker. And here's what it comes down to. If your triceps grow, all your presses are going to go up, which means your pecs and your delts are going to get more tension. They're going to grow later as an after effect. So the triceps will grow first, then those other muscles will grow, and then you'll probably have to do more direct tricep work to keep it moving. Is what you'll probably have to do. Right? You do different accessory movements to thicken up weak links in your assistance movements if your assistance movements are helping the main lifts, because you don't do that much of the classic lifts. You get to a threshold where at some elite levels in powerlifting, the classical lifts only make up 10% of their training. Right? For early on, most of our classic type lifts are going to make up 80% or more of a novice lifter's training just for building a base. Of course they will. At some of the more elite levels in powerlifting, they start making up like 10% of your total training every week. And it works because you're still getting the practice you need on them. You're getting the movement patterns practice, but you're building everything up, all the muscles involved, all the joint angles involved. And that still works. It carries over. after you've mastered the lift and built a starting base. So, I mean, powerlifters already train that way. And here's the point I would come back over and say is actually it needs to go the other way. Bodybuilders need to be training more like powerlifters, because that works real well, doesn't it? When the drugs doses come down, or the guys want to keep their gains when they cycle off their gear, or, God forbid, they don't want to do any drugs at all in bodybuilding. Now, that's tough. That's a conundrum. You better be very, very genetically gifted to compete at any level, including natural bodybuilding, successfully drug-free. You better be really strong, because a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle. They should probably be working on a strength base. But let's come back over. If they're training like a power lifter, they're still going to be doing direct volume work for their lagging body parts. They'd be training like a power lifter. It's just a different way of looking at it. But let's come back over to that point. I understand what they're trying to say, but that's what guys already do. And I remember Chris Lovato, when I met him at an expo, said that he noticed that he made the best hypertrophy gains of his life when he was running Westside. He said that face to face when we were talking. He's a natural bodybuilder. He made his best gains ever, particularly in his back, his lats, his traps, everything. I said they grew more on that than anything else I've ever done. Worked for him. Now, what I will say, let's come back over to that other point. Maybe train like a powerlifter, eat like a bodybuilder. A lot of powerlifters, that's maybe where we have to learn that, you know what, maybe cheeseburgers and donuts to get stronger is not the best way to go. Maybe we need to be worried about our overall health and our body composition, because having better health improves recovery time so that we can train harder. Having a lower body composition, lower body fat, means we can get into a weight class easier and be more competitive. I mean, why compete in the 242 if you can get lean enough and keep 100% of your strength and compete in the 220, right? And bodybuilders can be a little bit more beneficial to that. They do know how to strip body fat down. You just don't need to get as ripped as they do for a contest. But if you get to, say, as a power lifter, you spend most of your year where a bodybuilder is at 12 or 14 weeks out from a bodybuilding show after he started his dieting process, I don't know, you might be doing pretty well. It might be beneficial to you. So I guess that's the way I would word it. Like, no. Powerlifters don't need to train like bodybuilders. Bodybuilders need to train like powerlifters, and powerlifters should consider dieting like bodybuilders. I think that might be the direction to go with it. Just my opinion. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.